sobriety profits me 100%. So why wouldn't I be sober?
Welcome to the Sober Spill podcast. I'm your host, Isabel. On this podcast, we have real conversations with people in recovery, their families, and organizations that pertain to this field. Today, I'm here with the host of the clinical side of our podcast, Jana Wu.
Thank you, Isabel. My guests will discuss best clinical practices, new emerging trends in substance use and mental health disorders, and how we can best take care of ourselves and our loved ones in recovery.
See you every Thursday.
And come spill with us soon.
Dr. Ashwini Hari Korapati.
Perfect. You can call me Dr. Ash.
Dr. Ash, welcome back. I love that. Dr. Ash, welcome back to the Sober Spill.
Thank you.
We are so glad to have you back. I have loved talking to you, this year about all different things: outpatient withdrawal management, detox, kratom, mental health, women's health, and we had a fantastic conversation last week. Mountainside has expanded our adolescent program. We saw a huge need this past year, especially for more support. And we've been great in the substance use disorders realm and supporting families. But this year, especially, we really saw a need to expand our services to adolescents, to start more of an outpatient intensive program, to do more groups to support people. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on where we are with adolescent mental health and substance use.
Yeah, it's a huge topic right now. It's amazing that Mountainside is doing that, and I applaud that because we are seeing unprecedented rates of anxiety and depression in our youth. And when I say youth, I'm speaking 13 to 24. Whether the kids are college bound or at home after high school, which we're seeing a lot. These kids are very, very at risk for high levels of anxiety and depression. I read statistics. Now, keep in mind, the stats are always behind what's going on clinically. For example, 2026 hasn't been published yet, obviously, but we have anywhere from 1 out of 5. I read 18 to 20% of adolescents suffer from anxiety and depression. Over 70% of adolescents think that anxiety and depression is a huge problem in their age group, among their friends, among themselves. So when they're asked this question, over 70% respond yes. And that is a very big, indicator of how we're doing. And, the answer is, we really need to do a little bit better. And, this isn't just an isolated problem. This is our societal problem. And, some people say, oh, well, aren't teenagers a bit hormonal, moody? And yes, that is a part of, the growing pains that we know of, right? The hormones that can make the moods go up or down. And obviously we also have, that kind of like juvenile mentality of what they think they're an adult. And, that always causes a bit of, difficulty in a family household. We've always had that, though. What we're seeing now is very, very high rates of depression, anxiety, suicidality. I read just recently that young, teenage girls are especially at risk. They are citing, and this research is pretty broad, but they're citing multiple reasons. Number one that I keep seeing everywhere is screen time and social media. Especially in the teenage girl population, because young girls who are very impressionable and who are, who feel in that age, this huge pressure to be beautiful and to, be perfect, right? At a time where your body's going through so many changes. And they're seeing these social media, pictures and filters and images of, what they or what society or we deem as perfect. And, it's it's causing, very high rates of depression. Screen time is also very interesting because, again, research being a little bit behind what we're seeing clinically, we physicians have seen very high rates of insomnia in the young, which we're never trained for. In medical school, when we're taught about insomnia, we're taught okay, this is like a 67-year-old woman who recently lost their spouse. Okay, they're having an adjustment disorder. They're having trouble sleeping at night. Okay, what can we do for her? And it's a very almost benign case. Now we're seeing insomniacs, in their late 20s. in their early 20s. We see it in teens.
Yes.
We see a high amount of Ambien use. Even melatonin, especially at a time period where in your teenage years, sleep research actually shows that you sleep the maximum. Like teenagers actually need,
What is the maximum? Like, what would
well,
that
they
look
say
like?
that teens usually need, like, let's say that the average, and again, this is an average because everybody's sleep pattern's different, but average adult being, requiring 8 to 8.5 hours of sleep a night, teens during that time where they're really growing and really, growing tall and taking in a lot of calories, they require sometimes up to 10, 11 hours at night. So you see, like, young, teenage boys sleeping into like noon on a Saturday, 11 a.m. on a, Saturday or Sunday. It's pretty common, and that's because your body's growing and you're taking in a lot of calories and you're changing. And so you really need that sleep for that period of time. And now we're seeing, many with sleep issues. So, the screen time is a huge problem. And schools have now realized it. And they're banning. I recently read Connecticut is has like something where they're banning phone usage bell to bell, meaning the whole school day kids are not allowed on their phones. So basically, phones are not, they cannot use their phones, and that's become very popular. Many schools are adopting that. I know my son's middle school basically bans cell phones. And these are some of the reactions to what we're realizing is becoming an epidemic.
Absolutely. There is so much there that you just said. And I'm thinking particularly that last point of cell phones being banned, bell to bell, how important that casual, spontaneous social interaction is.
Yep.
I know one of the things we saw a lot the past 2 years is students in college taking mental health leaves, taking medical leaves, maybe during mid-semester, coming back, recalibrating, taking some time for mental health treatment. And we were all looking at that together as clinicians, with the providers, with the parents, of like, what's going on? And it's a very sensitive age, of course, going into college, but I think a lot of it is too, these kids, particularly at this age in 2026, 2025, they were at such a sensitive age during COVID. And that was a time before a lot of the cell phone warnings were out, when that was their option to socialize with friends, as Snapchat. And so a lot of the young adults we were working with hadn't experienced living with a roommate, hadn't experienced sharing bathrooms, hadn't experienced even ordering food now on an app. So doing all of that at once, going to school as a freshman, was very anxiety-inducing for many people. And we saw a lot of, like you mentioned, the anxiety and depression at unprecedented levels where people could not finish the semester. Even with the help of the mental health programs at school, they really needed, again, that reset.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when we rewind back and look at those adolescent years, some of the factors you mentioned, the sleep, the technology, and that spontaneous social interaction that a lot of kids miss.
Correct. And this is very sad. To go back to primatology research, right? Because we humans are higher order primates. We need each other, and it's not like a Hallmark movie. It really is the basis of our brains and our brain development. So when you see, or you're watching a group of monkeys, they're always together, they're touching each other, they're interacting with each other. Even the adult monkeys are taking some time to play, to goof around. And you see that constant social interaction in their, close family units and little kin groups and their little, groups that they're always interacting with each other. And that kind of free play, and that was also cited in the research, that free, independent play where children are just kind of like allowed to just be with each other and, play a lot, has really been, curtailed by an excessive use of screens and doing much more isolating activities. So we're seeing the human brain reject the matrix. That is literally what we're seeing. We're seeing that the human brain, likes to be in the room with real people, jostling up against each other, hugging each other, maybe playing a sport, taking a break, having a snack together. If you watch kids, that's what they really, that's how they play naturally. And so with in general, our society becoming so structured, and we have a lot of resources, which is amazing. But this free play, this interaction, this socialization has really decreased in, our children's childhood compared to, let's say, ours, right? I mean, I used to play for like in the summer, maybe 6 hours, like just like noon to like 6 p.m. I mean, sometimes till the sunset. Soccer, whatever. I would take a quick break to have a snack, and I would be, back outside playing with my friends. And so that kind of interaction is very, very important to the brain. It's very, very important to childhood brain development. And keep in mind that, kids are kids for a long time. The human brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is the area that does the decision making, that forms the personality, that forms what we call like the executive functioning of a person, it's not fully developed till 25.
That's a long time.
That's a long time. So you need that, play, that fun time together, and we're seeing that teens are spending a lot of time in their own rooms, isolated on their screens, and their brains are rejecting that. And that's what we're seeing. And, sometimes I joke with my patients, you have a healthy, gorgeous brain. You're sad or you're depressed because this is your brain's reaction to the matrix. It doesn't like this virtual living. It wants the real, authentic experience. We all crave authenticity in our life, right? Like, I hear that word being used all the time. Like, oh, you got to have this authentic vacation, right? This authentic experience. That is like a natural need to crave authenticity, to crave, real human interaction, the hugs, the warmth, the, joking around. And that's really how, we develop and grow. And when we restrict that, we're seeing, just basically a huge rebellion. And that's what's happening in the adolescent, preteen, the world of the youth. And we're seeing it also in adults. It's and then we compound that, let's say, with teenagers trying to self-treat these symptoms with things like depressants, whether they're alcohol or opioids or kratom or cannabis, which has become very, very, huge in terms of usage.
Across all age demographics.
Exactly.
Which is, I think, where we're seeing a lot more adolescent use, as we're seeing a lot more parents use and grandparents. Cannabis use is an all-time high for every age demographic, including the 65 plus. So it's interesting when something has been so destigmatized, where I look at what you just said about the adolescent brain still developing up to age 25, the sleep, the need for like movement, spontaneity, authenticity, and then the accessibility and the place where we are as a culture with cannabis, where, you walk around New York City, you're smelling it everywhere. You walk around even a lot of parts of Connecticut, you're smelling it everywhere.
Yeah.
So if it's okay for it to be in the air, it's hard for, like you said, the adolescent brain whose prefrontal cortex is still developing to figure out and determine their judgment on it.
Correct. Absolutely. You hit it. I couldn't have said it better myself. Exactly. So you're looking at a very at-risk group. You're looking at, young kids who, and this has really interfered, I've seen, with them accumulating degrees as well. We've had kids drop out of, college after the first year or second year, not because they're chasing, their own ideas to innovate or start a company or anything like that, but just out of sheer inability to, follow through with the course loads and take the exams necessary for a degree. And, cannabis, as a very, very strong central nervous system depressant, inhibits, brain function. So we're taking our youth at the prime of their life where they need to be, let's say, accumulating lots of knowledge and attaining degrees or attaining, a plan to succeed. And we're bathing it with a central nervous system depressant that is going to inhibit brain function. And we're telling them, good luck, figure it out. And on top of that, many of these kids are already having anxiety and depression, to combat. And so, this combination is really creating a lot of problems, where we see, young kids who, finish college and they're moving back home to their parents' home and they're sitting in the basement and they're playing video games and they're on screens, 15 hours a day, and they're, ingesting large amounts of cannabis. And their parents are like, we don't know what to do.
And it's hard to, I think, 'cause our base level now, we as a culture have gone through a horrendous opioid epidemic. So I also understand, and I talk to a lot of families where like the default is it could be worse.
Right.
And there's so much trauma that we're all exposed to culturally every day on our screens, on the news, where it's always like, well, it could be worse. They could be out doing this, that, the other. They could be using fentanyl. They could be, and it's, yes, we have a baseline, but if that is, there also is, we could be in a different place. We could be in a different place where we are engaging more together, where we're doing more connection in real life.
Exactly.
Yeah, because we know there are some benefits to sort of the gaming online culture. There's ability to communicate with people worldwide, to feel like you have a collective, to fit in, all of these things. But there's a huge portion of it that takes us away. No, I think most of us, like there are very few absolutes in lives, but I bet we could basically say most of us have spent too much time scrolling.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone I've ever met that says like, I haven't spent enough time scrolling the internet, right?
So keep in mind that, and again, this isn't to, I feel so old fashioned saying this at times because I'm like, it's bad for you. But like the technology and the way that it is meant to be addictive.
Yes.
They have done a lot of studies.
And it is a multi-billion-dollar global industry that is meant to keep us connected and to sell us things.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's true.
Exactly. They have figured out a way to monetize your time.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. And your brain energy.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I've said this to my patients as well. Like, we are spending our real life, our time, right? Watching either actors and actresses, in movies or little snippets or whatever, reels, act out fake stories. And we are trying to convince our brain this is our real life. And when the brain says, no, I'm getting depressed, right? What's the solution to that? The antidote to that is to get out there and actually live the life, to go kayaking, to go, do some whitewater rafting, to go and, even for a hike with a friend, to go, be in nature, right? Which is very soothing for, the brain. And it's hard to go against the flow. And the flow right now is to be on screens and to, be scrolling all the time and to put off your bedtime and develop insomnia. And the things that are happening is just, indicative of how addictive these things are, right? You have more than enough ample evidence. Like moms are seeing it everywhere. Now we have research coming out. Moms have been seeing it. I saw it in my son when he was 7. So this would be about 5 or 4 years ago. I saw that he was getting a bit too addicted. And so I took everything away. I started getting him to paint, to do puzzles, to do Legos, to do other things. It was a little bit more burdensome on myself as a mom. And as somebody who has a little bit of awareness of addiction medicine, I found that my life was imitating my art. And, when you see things like this, right? And at that time, it was pretty early. My husband was like, oh, tech isn't bad. It's everywhere. No, it's bad. It's bad. I mean, and again, like I would say that if you have a teen who's healthy, who's in, athletics, who has a good group of friends, who's out there, who's energetic, and you don't see them, with despondent thoughts or, you don't see them lonely, etc., then great. Then maybe the technology is really being used in moderation, and that's great. So, but I would say minimal during this age. This is what I'm seeing, in terms of just the number of patients who are coming to us at Mountainside, yes, with a substance use disorder, but also with an underlying psych condition of anxiety and depression.
Absolutely. Well, especially that age group, the 8, I would say like the 14 to 18, 18 to 25. Yeah. A lot of the 18 to 25 primary diagnoses we see are ADHD, anxiety, and cannabis. And so it's this interesting trinity. So I think that's pretty inextricable too, that we're it's undeniable. It's seeing that.
Right.
And I wonder too, it's hard because it comes back to, and many parents acknowledge this, well, like I'm online all the time because I have to be for work, and we justify for work because, we, as a culture, many of us,
Right.
work on our phones, on our off time, or we
Yes.
continue the work into night or our own doom scrolling.
Yes.
So what do you say to families that can, that are struggling as a family?
Yeah, you know what? This is it really does take a village, um y- uh, so I have 3 children. My son is 11, my daughters are 6 and 4. So what I do is I try to incorporate like kind of monkey time, like this free play kind of time every week. What I usually do is call over my friends with their kids on Friday, and we just let the kids run upstairs and play hide and seek and any game they want to upstairs, and we sit and have tea and snacks or whatever and relax and unwind. And during the weekend, between birthday parties and just the number of like just sports and different things, again I have like 2 to 3 social events where we're just socializing. The kids do not have screens, they do not have iPads. I know I'm probably an extreme, but they don't need it. They're happy kids. They look at people in the eyes, they say hello. When we're at restaurants, I have them decide order.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That is actually a huge intervention, I would say,
Yes.
because I've worked with so many adolescents, and I will also say I've worked with many people in their 20s professionally where we work together on using a phone, because so many people in their 20s, text, they email, but picking up a phone and speaking through some challenging that are things that aren't just scheduling, it is different from certain people and their some people that haven't had that experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a skill. It's a social skill. When you are talking to teenagers, they're not looking in your eyes. I mean, that's like one of the first things that I've really noticed, where they're not making eye contact. They're not asking you, in the service industry, hi, good morning, how are you? Even if it's, simple, or it's a smile, or it's an acknowledgement, that whole greeting has kind of disappeared, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you see in terms of like inattention or attention span, when you place your order, sometimes it takes 3 to 4 times for them to kind of get the order right. They almost prefer you order on an app, right? When you
so they can see it on the screen. Yeah, so it's very interesting. It's like training new neural pathways of that listening, connecting, the eye contact. Yeah, it's really interesting how these interventions can be so extremely helpful. If you're listening out there and you've been to residential treatment, you can probably relate. I feel like most people I talk to say one of the most difficult things they did when they came into detox was surrender their phone, and one of the best benefits of going to treatment and residential is not having a phone.
Yeah.
The freedom not to be tethered to something, the freedom to have awkward conversations at lunch, in group.
Yeah.
It's so profound. I actually was running a group last week in the city, and we were talking about that benefit because, they're back in the city living their lives, and how they missed just being present with people and not having to respond to text, not having to check their phones.
Yes.
And
it's like summer camp for adults.
Exactly.
Like they have fun.
Yeah.
And that's what you need. And, to recreate that is hard in our modern society. We have to be proactive. Luckily, I have 2 like really close friends who are also moms who also understand that, our kids need to play together. And it's all age groups. It's like from 4 to 12, and they just
have to work it out.
Yeah, they just run upstairs, figure out what game you're going to play. Fine, make a mess, we'll clean it later. It's fine, but just like let them play, let them have that free time. We do it on the weekends. We do it, at birthday parties. My girls, they have to say hi to adults. They have to greet them. One thing, when they go to birthday parties, they have to go thank the mom because she's the one who threw the whole party. And so I just see kids leaving. I'm like, no, go wish, your friend again, and go hug the mom and thank them for the party that you enjoyed for the last 2 hours. So these little things of like connecting, interacting, even when we travel, whatever country we're in, they learn please and thank you in that language, and they have to use it and say it, even if it's just 2 words. They know a few more words of Spanish, I want to say now, but when they order, I let them tell me what they want, but then when the waiter comes, they speak for themselves. They say hello to the waiter. They say, could you please? And then they say their order, and then they say thank you.
I'm Ricky, recovery support clinician. Managing withdrawal symptoms no longer means leaving home. Mountainside's new outpatient withdrawal management programs provide confidential, professional support with daily check-ins from our psychiatric and clinical team. It is designed for your busy life so you can heal without disruption. Find out more at mountainside.com.
These are all things too that adults can learn as well. I mean, I think that's something we see, and I know even today I lead new hire orientation. One of the things I ask new hires at Mountainside is, what have you noticed at our campus? What have you noticed, Giselle? It's beautiful, it's clean. Every time someone says, wow, people make eye contact. They look at you and they're speaking. No one's walking around their phones here. And obviously we're a treatment center, so for some reason it's confidentiality. We're not on our phones, but it's also the culture. And I say, nowhere more do you notice it than like New York City. You know, everyone's on the subway, looking at their phones, ear pods in. You walk into New York and it's like, hello, eye contact. Would you like some infused water?
Yes.
You know, welcome to group. And it's this slow down and this human connection that you feel of like, wow, people are actually noticing me and they want to engage. And of course, there are different reasons we don't engage sometimes in public places for safety, etc. But it's so important, and your body feels it and your nervous system feels it. When, you know, versus if you're in a group and you're trying to talk and someone's on their phone.
Exactly. And even as adults, sometimes, you know, I get frustrated when, you know, members of my family are on their phone when I'm like trying to spend time with them. You know, it's like, you didn't hear me because you're on your phone, put it down, you know. It's almost like I want to implement my own no screens at the table, you know, ever. And, you know, because like that's our family time. That's the time that we joke about our day. We talk to each other. I mean, that goes without saying in my house. There are no screens. But you know, and I know I'm a little bit strict about that, but the reason is that I see the differences in my kids. They say hello, they hug people, they're not afraid to go up to people, even though they're young. And, you know, we're seeing social phobias. You know, anxiety is the most common, mental health disorder that we have, like, and it comes in different, you know, categories. There's social phobias, there's social anxiety, there's, you know, generalized anxiety, there's like kind of like a range of different types of anxiety, but really if you look at the heart of it, like socializing kids and especially our teens, and you know, making it uncomfortable for them, you know,
safe, uncomfortable hormones. Absolutely.
Exactly. Like I tell my son, you're here, go ask the coach what the plan is for this week, like for a summer camp. And, you know, you let me know. You know, no, I'm not going to ask the coach. You ask and you figure it out and you let me know what you need for this week. And I'll, exactly. And he should be able to communicate. He should be able to keep in mind what that, you know, summer camp coach said, and then bring that information back to me. And then, yes, I will, you know, make sure that he's prepared for that week. But even these simple things, I see that kids are not able to do that. They're kind of like, you know, could you just text it to me? And I'm like, let's keep it in our mind, right? Like we should be able to.
Because that's a good mental exercise. Absolutely.
Exactly. And that's what we're seeing. Even in, you know, our you know, 21, 22-year-olds, when I'm talking about a treatment plan, right? I ask them to write it down. You know, don't put it in your phone. Don't text it. If you're having a hard time remembering, I want you to write it, you know? And then I want you to say it back to me. Like, why are we going to...
It literally is muscle memory. It's so powerful to write something down. That's a great practice.
Yeah.
What would you say if there are some parents listening now and they're feeling guilty, like, oh my gosh, it's too late. My kids are 18 to 22. I had to work through COVID and they were on a lot of screens. What would you say to these parents that have adolescents that are struggling with anxiety and depression now? What would you say are interventions they could do?
Do screen-free weekends. Like, just say Wi-Fi's off Friday night to Sunday night. You know, I know it sounds so, oh my gosh, harsh and severe. I know.
People have lived that way for centuries. Yeah, it's true. We didn't die.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah,
we did do
We're fine. We're fine.
Okay, that's a huge intervention. Did everyone hear that? A self, what would you call it?
A Wi-Fi weekend, screen-free Sunday.
Okay.
You can start slow. There's no such thing as too late. Remember,
Okay. That's important.
Yeah, the brain is, fully developed at 25. You have time. You have willpower. There is nothing stronger, and I tell all my patients this, there's nothing stronger than your will and your ability to implement change in your own life. There's no medication that can do that as easy as you yourself and your decision-making process. And so some of my patients say, well, I'm, 27. I say, great. You have a fully performed prefrontal cortex. Great time to break that habit, great. Some people say, oh, I'm so old. I'm 56. Great. You still can, we have people now. Yeah, we have people now. Exactly. Neuroplasticity. Beautiful. We have people now who learn instruments at 52, and by 57, they can play in symphonies. It's that old, Americans say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's completely been debunked. You can continue to learn. Your brain loves learning. Your brain loves new experiences. It lights up in functional MRIs when you can even imagine yourself doing something, painting, pottery, any of these arts and crafts, just goes to show you how important these, little tasks are for us and for our mental health. Many inpatient psychiatric, wards have arts and crafts as part of the treatment program.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
It's so important that you can be unlocking that creativity. And you see, too, it doesn't take much. So it also doesn't take much financially. It doesn't mean you have to go to an art studio even or take art lessons. It's like getting back to that creativity and letting your brain have some, spontaneity and that push its own boundaries. What about when we look at adolescent treatment? I know I speak to a lot of friends. I speak to a lot of people like me that say oh no, my kid is too anxious. They just need individual therapy. And I'm like, but have you tried that? Yes. And I know from being in, group therapy for almost 2 decades now, the power of watching people learn about themselves by seeing how they engage with others and learning about themselves in safe spaces. But we, and usually with adults, they don't choose to go to rehab. It's usually a last choice type of thing. And they often, adults start that way too. I need individual. I just need to see a psychiatrist. I just need the right med. And then they experience the profound change that happens when you're in a supportive group with the psychiatric help, with, the individual therapy.
Yeah.
That really gets the movement going. I see that kids really need that too, but parents are almost adverse to putting their kids into treatment. I think that the fear is, and I'll say it out loud, is a lot of parents think they're going to learn worse habits.
No.
If I put them in a treatment group, they're going to hear about these drugs they don't know about. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, great point, great question. And I would say that, we human beings have such a innate ability to relate and to offer each other comfort, and, it was interesting. Just recently, there was this little video I watched of the Dalai Lama giving amazing advice. And it was these 2 American teenagers who were basically told you're allowed to ask him one question. And the question was brilliant. It was, what do we do about our generation being so anxious? That was the question they chose. And I thought that was a brilliant question for this generation. So the young man asked the Dalai Lama, what would you say about our, generation being so anxious and being so, depressed and having so much, mental strain and our mental health being so affected? What would you say is the solution to this? And, His Holiness gave an amazing response, which was, he said, altruism, which is where you, fill other people's cups. And in that way, you fill your own. And it was kind of in a way that when you are so self-involved and you only see yourself, you only see your needs, you only see your experience, right? It is so limiting in your own healing process. But when you are able to relate and you're able to say, oh, I know how this person feels. Oh, I've been there where he was. Oh, you know what? I kicked, I got off of Kratom too. I know what you're going through, right? That relatability is so human and so important for our own journeys, right? And, I don't even think it's something where it's only spiritual. We have science that also backs how great socialization and connecting with, other human beings is for the brain. We are not meant to just be completely isolated and live by ourselves. We have evidence, look what COVID did to our country, right? We were isolated. we were in our little capsules at home, and look what happened to mental health, right? So you have that evidence as a parent, as a loved one, that, putting your kids in a group environment, putting your kids, even, going to a soup kitchen and, okay, just filling bowls for like an afternoon, right? It does so much. It gives so much an understanding. And it might be hard to watch. It might be hard, oh, I don't want to subject my child to understanding poverty at such a young age, that the thing is that they're doing something about it. So you're giving them an action that is so positive, right? And then they're like, you know what? My house is really nice. And you know what? You're giving them a way of being grateful.
And part of the solution, as I said too, like, hey, you can do a little part. You can make a change in someone else's day. Had to actually have that experience and let themselves sort of embody and feel that experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really important. You're right. Versus like sort of a passivity of watching it.
Yeah.
I think there are, I'm seeing there are these small pockets sometimes where we can find them too. I know my kids do Scouts, which is now formerly Boy Scouts of America and is now all gender. And I went to a Scout camp recently with one of my children, and it blew my mind. No cell phones.
Excellent.
My cell phone didn't even work. There was no Wi-Fi. And I was blown away by 6 to 10 p.m. how we were going, and that we could fit so much in a day without technology.
Yeah.
And there's that service component that I often don't see other than in 12-step communities or religious communities where it's like part of the whole Scout thing is now to give back.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, there are these pockets, where you had to sit with strangers too, and the kids also talk to each other, and the counselors sit with the kids and talk. And I thought, this is incredible. And it's sort of back to basics, that we can go back to doing these things.
Yeah.
And the Scouts had to do a lot of consciousness to make it safe. They did a lot of training, for adults to be there as far as adult awareness and safety around sexual abuse and all of these things. And I was so grateful too for the transparency around that. Like, let's be transparent about what the concerns are. Yeah. So I also encourage any parents out there, if you're curious about adolescent programming and you're scared about things like that, like of how safe will this be for my kid?
Yeah.
Talk to us. Yeah. Talk to us to hear what it's like to actually have trained counselors in the room with adolescents to facilitate these conversations and make sure that we're aware of the safety in the room.
Yeah. Recently, an Easton mom, because I live in Easton, an Easton mom was sharing that her and a bunch of moms are in this WhatsApp group, and basically their kids have a bicycle gang where the boys and girls jump on their bikes and they just kind of go around, and the moms kind of message each other, they're at my place, I'm giving them lemonade, and another mom says, okay, I think they're coming to my place next. And the kids are kind of just on their bikes, and they're, within this area, like this little network. And I was very inspired by that. I said, that's amazing. Yeah, that's, and they don't have phones. If they need something, they just go to one of the moms in the, circle for whatever, they may need. And they're out for, 4 or 5 hours just riding their bikes. And I was like, this is amazing. How can I sign up? Right. So we have a lot of, power and abilities, an ability as, moms and as caregivers to kind of cultivate this screen-free, in real life, authentic, your brain's going to love it, experiences. As crazy as they may seem, I have taken my kids to the Amazon, in Ecuador, and I have taken them dancing. Like, there was a tribe that we met and they danced with us and we danced with them, and we did not have screens, and we had a great time. And we were on the river, and it was an amazing day. And again, it's not something that, can be done virtually. You have to be there. You have to, but these are the kinds of experiences that I think are worthwhile, whether it's, travel or even road trips or anything where you're telling your kid, okay, you're going to navigate on this map, not on a phone.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. That's a really
Find
big
us an
one.
exit,
Yep.
in a town, because we need to stop to eat. And if you don't find the exit, we're not going to
find
eat.
it. Yeah, that's actually a really good one for
Yeah.
everyone to go back to map reading.
Yes.
It's a very good mental exercise.
Yes.
Any other things, again, to parents out there or caregivers that may be listening that are really worried about
Their kids.
their kids
Yeah.
and substance misuse and
So, I live in this beautiful state of Connecticut, and I really love the libraries and the amount of activities they have. But when I go into them, they're like tombs. And I'm like, where is everybody? Because every weekend I was at the library. when I was a kid. So I think like libraries have a lot of activities and,
Free activities,
free.
absolutely free.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
You can drop your kids, they can play chess, they can, do, my kids go in for like an arts and crafts that's free. They go for like an hour and they also get like my little girls go there and they get like story time and then they also have free play. And so I think like the libraries also, I think we need to get back to our communities and engage with them and create like kind of screen free, fun times and just let the good times roll in real life. And I think that's why, I always tell, moms like start small. If your kids are on screens a lot, do screen free Sunday. And you're gonna, maybe I will warn parents, it's more burdensome on us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing, right? Because, when I was taking my son off of all these video games, I would sit with him and for 2.5 hours we'd be painting, but I would be off my screen too. And we're painting together, so it is a little bit more, and again, defined burden. For me, I like spending quality time with my children. So, but it is, it does require a little bit more of you. Screen free Sunday might be like, okay, you're also going to help me make a meal, and, we're going to, organize some things. We're going to then go for a 2-hour bike ride as a family. Whatever your screen free Sunday looks like, that's a great start. And I will warn parents, yes, you will have to put down your own phones and get involved and, cook, and it'll be a mess, but it's a lot of fun and they learn. And, that's an activity the whole family can do. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend. Like, let's get back to the authentic life.
Yeah, start small.
Yeah.
I love that. Start
Yeah.
small. Dr. Ash, we know teenage experimental is like experimental use and exploration is part of being a teenager, part of your brain developing. Like, it's not pathological to want to try really risky things. So how do we feed that in kids when the inclination now is often like trying drugs?
So, it's really interesting, but as parents, we have a lot of challenges, which is now the drugs that are out there are extremely harmful, right? We've already faced that with a drug like kratom, which just it got outlawed in Connecticut. But these are substances that have opioid and sedative properties. And, even cannabis, it's at such a high THC concentration that we are seeing cannabis psychosis, which, listen, I was an internist in New York for 10 years. I could count on one hand the number of patients I saw with cannabis psychosis. Like, it's very rare. But now with edibles and gummies and much, much higher concentrations of THC, cannabis laced with things like fentanyl, right? Like, we have a drug scene that's very unregulated and very dangerous. So
and
it's
very global.
And global.
Really global market. I think that's one of the things we see is like kids know how to get research chemicals online. I mean, adults do. Adults get research peptides, and kids know how to get research. And not even kids, other adults too. Some people use research drugs, psychoactive drugs. But you can get them from all over the world now online with crypto, on the dark web, etc. So how do we deal with that?
I would say talk to the kids first, right? Like, absolutely talk to your kids, and be very open with them and explain like what's going on, that why these drugs are so dangerous. Number one, they're not regulated. Number two, they're highly addictive. And the reason for that is because it's a profit enterprise, right? Sobriety profits only the person who's sober. Drug use profits a lot of different entities, right? So even that I find makes people take a pause, right? Because it's like, whoa, sobriety profits me 100%. So why wouldn't I be sober, right? So that itself, like argumentative wise, it kind of, I feel, wins a lot of arguments. Number two, yes, teenagers may experiment. Be open with them and let them come to you. And also explain to them like your expectations. You cannot get into a car when anybody's inebriated. I expect you to use the Uber. I expect you to be safe. No more than, 1 or 2 drinks when you are in the drinking age. All of the burden that we already overcame with things like Mothers Against Drunk Driving and Just Say No. All of those policies we still have. It's just not in the forefront, right?
I think as the drug market has advanced. I think
Exactly.
the other thing I would say to parents is, like, if this sounds scary, you can't know every substance out there.
Yeah.
So that's where it's really important, I think, to talk to people that specialize in this every single day, that know what drugs are on the market, that know what kids are using, that know what the community's using.
Right.
Which, because I find that a lot is that we, like you said, the market is way ahead of the research
Right.
and the policy.
Right.
And the research is ahead of the policy. And so there's so much out there that it's impossible for parents to be aware of everything. But if you are curious, if you are worried about your kids, seeking help as a family.
Exactly.
Like having those open communications of like, I don't know exactly what you're doing. Because that's often what parents will come like, I don't know what my kid is on. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But their behavior is different and I know something's wrong.
Right.
And that's a really good start, I think. Okay, you know something's wrong. Bring them in. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
In a place where they're not going to scare us. We might have concern for them, but anything their kids are saying to us, we have heard before in a different form, and we're here to help, and we'll have the resources to help.
We are professionals. I would say that we have had an extensive experience with substance use disorders, what substances are out there right now. I would say 100%, have these open conversations. Also educate your child, right? Because, when they talk about cannabis, etc., this, drug, it inhibits brain function. So you will struggle in college or school even more. It will make it that much more challenging, right? It takes away your attention. It literally, because your brain, when you're a teenager, you like the dopaminergic hits. But a lot of teenagers who are high accomplishing, like for example, athletic or academic, get the hits in those ways. So they win, their soccer competition, they win their tennis match, they are, their essays, number one in the school. So this gives them those hits, right? So their brain is at risk, or not at risk, I would say is very sensitive to these dopaminergic hits. Now you bathe that brain in a substance like cannabis, which really removes a lot of that and replaces it with taking away motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And it literally takes the jet fuel out of your, young, ambitious child. And I've heard parents say that to me. He was a go-getter. He was editor of a newspaper. He was doing this. He was doing that. He went to college. He came back. I don't recognize him. Like, ask him, do you see what's happened? Right? Like, and that's where we can really help, right? Because we know these patterns about things like cannabis and, the teenage brain and the brain of the youth. Have these open conversations with your, children. Yes, they may experiment. Yes, they may have one drink, but educate them, so that they understand your inhibition is taken away, right? Like when you drink, make that very open. In terms of if you're going to try something, there are safe ways to do it. But, here is what's happening, marketing. And I always say this, marketing is $1 billion industry.
Of course, yeah.
And it changes every, decade. And they have brilliant marketing, a lot of these
That's
drugs.
what I was just thinking. Our time and attention is really what's for sale. Like you mentioned with technology, but also drugs.
Yeah.
That is for sale.
There.
And I think when kids realize that too, it's like not trying to prohibit, I think, free choice, free will, or their experimentation, but it's also just being aware of what you are pawn to.
Exactly.
Where you are in this.
Exactly. So I tell, sometimes my young patients that the marketing is brilliant.
It
is $1 billion industry. There's not much that I can tell you that'll compete with that. However, the chemistry of the substance, right, does not and will never change. So alcohol has been a depressant for 1,000+ years. It will continue to be a depressant. So no matter how beautifully they package it, no matter how, awesome they advertise the drinks, it is a depressant. So if you know that, you are already armed against the fight because knowledge is a power, So I tell my patients, arm yourself. If you are aware of the chemistry, do not fall prey to the marketing. The marketing is genius. I'm going to tell you that right now. It is genius. It is brilliant. It's $1 billion industry. I will not be able to fight that. But I can give you the truth, which is that the chemistry of the substance has not and will never change. Opioids are depressants. Cannabis is a depressant. Alcohol is a depressant. Know what it's going to do to you. If you have a little depression, it's going to make it a whole lot more. If you have a little bit of anxiety, it may help you feel a little bit better, but it gets you addicted. So you take more and more and more and more and more. All of a sudden, you're a different person. You're on
that sort of working those muscles that counter of sort of self-soothing and being able to mitigate and manage your own anxiety. Yeah.
Correct.
Wow.
And I tell my patients too. I've gone to a Buddhist monk and meditated before. First of all, there's a lot of free meditation centers. Many Buddhist temples are free. I think I've taken like some fruit in donation. Literally, it's a free service.
Or Dharma recovery.
Dharma
Recovery is
recovery.
incredible.
Yeah. And just sit and, and again, learn some meditation, take some deep breaths, and use that as a ritual to relax. It is not a profit. It's not a for-profit entity. It is not going to hurt you to learn to meditate. It's just for you, And I always tell people, if you don't want to meditate, that's fine. Choose another, thing that you like to do. However you like to relax, and profit yourself 100% with sobriety.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Ed.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, Mountainside can help. Call 860-365-6764 to speak with our caring treatment team.